Okay, enough people. Thank you all for coming this afternoon. This is the last Agora Talk, and again, I would like to thank Momus Thessaloniki Photography Museum for giving us this amazing space. We're going to talk about why investigative docs matter more than ever. I mean, you can imagine why, because the world is going crazy, and no one really knows what's truth and what not. So let us be more enlightened. Thank you so much for being here with us. And I will pass the floor to you, dear Bridget, to make introductions. Enjoy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Thanos. Let's give a round of applause for the team of the Agora, including all the people working very hard behind the scenes, behind their cameras. My name is Bridget O'Shea. If you've been here over the last days, maybe you've seen me in some of the other sessions. I'm one of the co-founders of the Documentary Association of Europe, and I'm an international consultant, helping people make their documentary films. And interestingly enough, usually I really work, if there was a spectrum, at what I would probably consider the other end of the spectrum, which is with creative documentaries that are author-driven, with a very strong point of view, that are also, of course, research-based, but I am very rarely with people who are working in the more current affairs, investigative end of the spectrum, or so I thought, and then I thought about it more, and I think that it's not actually like a linear spectrum at all of these things, and I'm always really interested where, I think like maybe all of us, where art and storytelling intersects also with research, investigation, and indeed speaking truth to power. I think actually that's my motivation to work in the field. And so I'm really happy to welcome three people who dedicate their time and lives to speaking truth to power, uncomfortable truths or dangerous truths or tragic truths, hopefully maybe sometimes happy ones, maybe not in the materials that we've selected to show you today. But I really feel it's like an honor to have you with us, and I really feel inspired by the hard work that you do, knowing that it's not simple and comes with great costs, but I'm sure also really wonderful fruits of your labor and rewards too. I think what I'm really interested in talking about today is also to find out, knowing that people have short attention spans, and that the news cycle is also moving very quickly, about how we can engage in long-term deep investigation, how we can find ways to express our research with people, how we can expose people safely, etc., etc. So that's kind of like what we're going to talk about. But I thought it would be really interesting, especially if we have emerging people or people who are coming from not such just journalistic backgrounds, to hear how each of these three professionals have found their way into the field and what their motivation is and where they come from, what they studied, did they study, all of that stuff. So each has prepared a short introduction of who they are and where they come from. And Jake, we're going to start with you, if you don't mind.
Brilliant. Oh, there we go. Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor to be here at this brilliant festival and get to see all the other talks and screenings and so forth. It's been really great. So yeah, I suppose as a kind of quickish introduction, I have been working for a team within the BBC World Service, which is called Investigations, which predominantly produces a range of investigative documentaries with a sort of geographical focus predominantly outside Europe. And sort of as you touched on, the kind of aim for that is, to try and deliver a level of accountability in the journalism, but presented through a documentary format. So prior to that, I've always been massively interested in film and documentaries. But prior to the BBC, I was working more in an investigative journalism space, and actually predominantly was working with a research charity at the time. And I suppose my kind of way into journalism and investigative docs and into the BBC sort of was married or at a similar time to firstly the pandemic, but also the kind of rise in open source intelligence, like OSINT journalism, which was something when I was kind of starting out, there were groups predominantly like Bellingcat who were producing this really incredible work from their computer screens, feeds ostensibly. And it felt when, seeing this work for the first time, especially in something maybe we'll get onto in the way that, media versus the sort of the ordinary person, definitely starting out, it felt like that was a bit of a gulf. And then watching people sort of on Twitter produce these incredible investigations from their bedrooms where they'd gone through, all of this open source data was really kind of inspiring. And it felt like a moment where there were more perhaps like meritocratic possibilities in that space. And that was when I started sort of getting into that and teaching myself some of those skills that groups like Bellingcat were using and New York Times Visual Investigations was just starting out with. And then sort of at the same time working for an organization during the pandemic where you couldn't physically go and travel to do your research, so you had to rely more heavily on this. It sort of just motored that interest and those skills forward. And then I suppose I just got very, very lucky because a team within the BBC, which had started as Africa Eye, that was doing documentaries focused on the African continent, were building a sort of open source driven investigations team off the back of that, which would do investigative docs within, using these tools and techniques. So I sort of snuck in, I suppose, that way, and have managed to kind of stick around ever since doing that kind of work predominantly, yeah.
It sounds so sexy. Like, I don't know. I've
never had that before.
I don't know how to say this. I just don't know how to say this in a politer way, more polite way. And it's because it's like the end of the festival. I've lost all social skills. But like, I just love fucking shit up so much. I just like busting things out. And so I just really admire the people who are doing like the grunt work and the leg work to be able to bust shit up in a really interesting way, because I don't have the attention span or the skills. My computer is just something that I use to type emails and watch YouTube on. So I'm really like, I find this world very mysterious and very sexy, but I'm sure that it's actually incredibly laborious and like searching for needles in haystacks or something. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what this process is before we move to Corinna?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's become quite a sort of broad church now, I suppose. And I think originally when, the first big, well, in my opinion, or more widely, the sort of first big open source driven investigation was the Bellingcat long report into the MH17 plane that was shot down. I can't remember, maybe in 2017. I can't remember the year exactly. And that was sort of the beginning, which was a load of, nerds, for lack of a better word, sitting around and going through all of this data that was available through, things that were posted online. And no one had been to the crash site or any of these other things and weren't able to. So I think that was the kind of the beginning. And since then, though, it's massively spread out and become a lot more mainstream in terms of ways of investigating. And, I'm sure both my colleagues here will talk about doing this type of work as well, which is very much part of it is finding a needle in a haystack, but it's also building a body of evidence which is sort of out there in public, which I think, and again, it's another thing we might go on to a bit more, is thinking about trust in both journalism and the media more widely. Yeah. And I think that type of journalism, which is maybe even 10 years ago was a lot more prominent, which is, trust me, I spoke to a great source who told me everything, and that's about it. Which, understandably, audiences can find themselves saying, why should we believe you about that? Whereas with a lot of the more open source stuff, you're laying it out and presenting the information almost sort of as you did it, and you're inviting audiences as well to say, well, if you don't believe me, here are the tools to do it yourself.
I'm so interested at the moment also in doing the reverse, which is like hiding things in plain sight. Like I'm really interested in this like super slippery moment where like especially fascism is so what do you say, like when something is on the move, you know, like it's slipping around and it looks like one thing one day and then the next thing another day. Like I find it really, really interesting to be trying to like really look at what's in front of me. And I'm sure that's also a response to things like forensic architecture and Bellingcat, etc. But if you think Jake's work is sexy, now we're going to talk to Corinna about her work that is equally sexy, that has the sexy title of a data editor, which sounds mysterious. Please, can you demystify your work a little for us and tell us also how you found yourself in the field?
Basically, I studied political science, which is very relevant to journalism, kind of irrelevant to journalism in a way, and data journalism. And I started working as a journalist in 2016. I started working for Vice Greece. And I began to do some investigations along with some colleagues. And then in 2019, I got a full scholarship for a 4 months long program in Columbia University. And I went there, and I can say that I'm a data journalist per se, because I like using like old school reporting techniques. And it's not, my work is not all about data. There are some stories that are not data stories that I produce. But I think that it gave me a really good understanding of what data are and how you can use them in some cases to tell a story. And then I got back and I worked with several media. Some of them were in Greece, and I've collaborated with some media abroad. And now for the past 3 years, I'm working for Solomon. Solomon is an independent investigative outlet based in Greece. We publish both in Greek and English. And we're mostly covering migration, environment and climate change. And we write some stories about corruption and so on.
Is it clear for everybody like what data also is? Should we also try to clarify that? Because I also think maybe it means different things in different circumstances to different people. So when you say data, what are you referring to?
Well, I can speak about how we use data from time to time. Sometimes it's about finding data online and edit them and analyze them and making visualizations and so on. Sometimes it's about making your own data sets, especially when there's a lack of information or available data, and trying to piece together different kind of data to explain something, to make sense of something. But I think this is a quite big conversation when it comes to data, because I think that investigative journalism is about data, and you don't have to like make a spreadsheet or like do very complex things when it comes to data analysis, because investigative journalism is about documents, is about not just, like you said, talking to a source, and that's all, and that makes a story.
Great. Also, you brought some concrete examples with you, so we're going to see some things in action as we move down the panel. But before we do that, Giorgos is here also to tell us about how he found himself in this field. Please tell us more.
Right, so I started working for foreign media in 2012. And after the Greek financial debt crisis and the refugee crisis, which were kind of concomitant, in a sense, began, I was working as a correspondent for a German magazine, Der Spiegel, at the time, which has a great reputation of investigative journalism. So the decision was made that we should focus on longer stories, no matter how long they take, and then produce pieces that go beyond the news, go look deeper into what's happening, and best case scenario, expose the secrets of people who don't want those secrets to be revealed, which I think it was Georg Simmel, that German, who said, like, secrets always benefit the powerful, right? So that was the whole rationale, right? So I was very fortunate in my career in the last 13 years or 14 years, working for Spiegel or ARD or with Solomon, for that matter, to have the time, the resources, the team, and to do those kinds of investigations that people should realize, because you mentioned someone before, like that people should realize that it's quite different for someone to go on Twitter or do some sort of analysis from his garage, rather than someone who's spending months and months and months of painstaking research, with lots of travel, with lots of fact-checking, with lots of people, with lots of editors checking everything that they do before something is published, right? Which comes to, of course, also to the topic of our subject, seeing is no longer believing, right? So for the last 12 years, I've worked for several media, including the Spiegel, the German TV, Solomon, the BBC as well, the Guardian, Al Jazeera, and other outlets, where my exclusive focus has been showing the cost of what it means when Europe says we want no more migration. So this is kind of a given for your average European voter, but we thought it is very important for for Europeans to understand what the costs, be it human, be it in other sectors, is of this policy, and I believe our investigations so far have done have contributed in raising public awareness and in exposing things that I guess many governments would like to have remained secret.
Like, I want to ask this next question before we move on, and it's for anyone, so feel free to answer. We find ourselves in a very bad moment of modern history, let's say, where people of good conscience around the world have, like, really valid concerns about the mixing up of business and governance and private interests and lobbying and tech fascism and regular fascism and everything else in between. And I wonder, like, does that mean, it sounds a bit silly, but I mean it sincerely, like, is it a great time to be an investigative journalist because there's just, like, so much going on? Or is it also difficult for you to maintain your focus when there is just, like, this kind of wall of, exposed corruption happening all the time? And particularly maybe thinking about the walls of Fortress Europe seeming to go up and up, and the militarization of everything going up and up. How do you feel in the field?
Can I just say this about this? Because obviously there's a major lack of trust in journalism institutions, right? So since we're in Greece now, I just checked the latest numbers. It's like 23% of people trust the media, right? But for me, this is not the reason to do less of this kind of journalism. It's a reason to do more of this kind of journalism, and to make people, you can be concise, you can do in-depth investigations, you can present the evidence, you can do the best you can to show the truth, and so long as there's still media, or there's organizations willing to support the media doing those investigations, these investigations should continue to happen. If we were to just give up and say, fine, people don't believe in the media anymore. You know, they will believe whatever someone posts on Twitter, and that's the end of it. Then okay, we might as well get retired. I mean, not in Greece, obviously, because you have to be 80 years old to get retired. But I mean, in other places, perhaps.
After you pay mysterious taxes that don't
mysterious
seem to go
tax is
anywhere.
very big social security. So I think it's very important. I think this is exactly the reason why we should persevere with media like Solomon, because I've worked with Solomon, for example, for a long time. You know, they're an independent outlet. You know, I know that their hearts are in the right place. You know, they want to expose the truth. They don't have an agenda or something like that. So I think it's the opposite. We should do more of this kind of stuff rather than less.
Yeah, I mean, of course I wholeheartedly agree with you, and that's again why for me it's so nice to have the three of you here in the festival and really to think about how the facts can be maybe also better integrated into the films that we're making. So like the interpretation of the facts is valid, but the facts are the facts. I think for me this is, I live in Germany, so it's been 2 years of horrible time with the newspaper, and I'm unable to look at the newspaper stand, and I'm unable to look at like the news ticker in our subway system that just spreads propaganda all the time for one side of a conflict all the time. And if you are expressing a difference of opinion, you are violently suppressed. So this has been a true shock to my system, thinking that also I'm in a more open-minded place. But I also agree with you, just because I can't look at the newspaper stand at the moment and I can't look at the newspaper also doesn't mean that I give up on the profession or the media. So I think I really admire you also, Will, to carry on, because it's really important that we keep going through this phase. But I would really like to talk just one thing also about maybe clarifying some terminology, like a glossary of terms. What's the difference then between investigative documentaries and current affairs documentaries? Is there a difference? Does it not matter? Maybe Jake, you want to answer, because I want to come to Corinna next about something else.
Yeah, it's a good question. I suppose there is quite a lot of crossover. I think quite a lot of investigative documentaries are current affairs documentaries, and perhaps some current affairs documentaries are investigative. I suppose the difference as I see it is perhaps that current affairs is more, this is something that's happening and we're going to show it to you. Whereas the idea behind the investigative documentary is you're kind of revealing something that's perhaps below the surface, and you're perhaps taking the story a bit further in terms of trying to find out something else and doing, what we do as investigative journalists, which is, revealing new information, as it were, rather than capturing that moment, I suppose. I think that maybe there's probably better people to sum up the difference, but that's sort of my view, I think.
But I think that's good because that gives us a framework for what we're talking about today. So for me, it's perfect. A+. Good job. And how long are we talking about your particular investigations? How long are you working on one subject, or do you consider actually maybe like all the investigations one investigation that just has different chapters?
No, I think it's quite nice once it's done and you've finished it and you've wrapped it up, and as you say, you've done all this, work, and you've gathered all the evidence from all these different sources. You hope that that's, as to a certain extent, it's done. So with us in particular, it really depends. I mean, investigations can take months or even years, and it really depends on sort of the nature of that. Obviously, the way I work is slightly different in the sense of the beginning of the project is more of the role of the investigative journalist and gathering the evidence, making sure it's all watertight, and then, once that's sort of as good as it can be, it's then moving into more the production side, and then, turning that investigation into a documentary that is hopefully vaguely watchable and, you know, has characters and a
Oh,
narrative
I don't
push.
mind if it doesn't have either of those things. For me, like in experimental space, characters totally optional, watchable, sometimes questionable. But I also think that you probably have, if you are investing this kind of research frame, you also want it to be accessible to a broader audience.
I think so, yeah, and accessible in a way where it doesn't feel like and maybe we'll talk about it a bit more in sort of the nature of storytelling and how it's going, but you want people to be able to engage with it and in a sort of intelligent way where you're not, doesn't feel like anyone's being talked down to, or, you know, but you also want it to be accessible in the way where people can engage with it and understand the steps, and it doesn't feel like this kind of smoke and mirrors thing that's happened, which again goes back to the kind of losing trust in things. I think, you know, what I've always tried to do is just lay it out the way you've done it and how you found it and the processes, which, you know, can perhaps sometimes be dull, but actually I think that process of sort of finding the next step and moving forward with the story and investigation is actually quite engaging to be taken on that journey as a viewer.
It's also comforting.
Yeah, I think
To make things accessibly understandable. I actually have a million questions about trust, but I also promised not to stray too much from the questions that I've formulated. So, but I think we can come back to this. Who do we trust? I also hadn't thought about it because I'm in a very much in a phase of trust nobody at the moment, which can only sustain you for a while. Before you either go crazy or have to start, you know, forming some bonds.
Could you define nobody?
Yeah, I love the news. I also wrote to you, like, I love 24-hour news channels, and I love the newspaper, and I love magazines, and I read a lot of them.
So you trust
and
them?
I not at the moment, no. But again, Germany has broken the trust. So, but I trust people I know in Germany who are exposing truths, like a beautiful filmmaker who's sitting over here with a film in the festival, doing her very best work to expose, secrets or state violence that has been hidden away in a corner or hidden in plain sight. But like, I also don't want to name and shame colleagues, I think. So I don't want to say the news outlets that I don't read, but from certain houses, I do not read them because I do not believe them. But then sometimes I do also read them because I don't trust them and I want to be confirmed that I continue not to trust. I know, which is also crazy. And then I trust the people who I know, who I work with, who are incredible documentary filmmakers who mostly now also have to work under very anonymous circumstances in order to be able to do their work. So I do trust them, yes. Who do you trust?
I totally disagree with you, to be honest. I do trust the New York Times. I do trust the Wall Street Journal. I do trust the Guardian. I do trust the Associated Press. I do trust Reuters. I do trust the BBC. I mean, my default mode is like when I read something, when an alert comes up in one of those outlets, I do trust that it's true unless proven otherwise. And even if it is, this does not minimize my trust in it because mistakes can happen at any point. What I'm trying to say is that people people are, in general, in Europe or abroad, are very media illiterate, and they really don't know what kind of painstaking, excruciating work is behind every single piece, be it a news piece, a 300-word news piece, or a much larger investigative journalism. So if they knew what's going on there, how many hours we spend, how much back and forth there is, how much legal scrutiny there is, how much editorialship there is, how much you have to stick to specific standards, then this trust could be at some point, at some part at least, got back. Obviously, there's some. It's not the same with Fox News or the Daily Mail and the New York Times or what else. But this is something that everyone can understand. But I think it's very, very, very unfair to just put everyone in the same basket and say, listen, the media is like untrustworthy. That's the end of it. I'm just going to go on Twitter and read whatever JJ25XYZ says, and then that's even better.
This I also agree with you, and I also think that a terrific information campaign. I mean, I was living in the heart of East Germany in 2014 and watched also Russian,
that explains a lot.
Interference. Well, I don't vote the way they vote. I don't live there anymore either, and I'm trying to leave the other place too. So it's like, but you saw it change like in front of your eyes, like unfolding change, not like immediate change, but the unfolding of the distrust. And I do like trust and follow the work of certain journalists on both sides of the spectrum who I trust and distrust, because I'm always interested to see also when untrustworthy facts are being spread or news is being spread, where they're coming from and what their sources are. And that started to make me go like a little cuckoo. So I stopped.
Fair enough. That's you need a nuanced approach to how you read your media. Obviously, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and I also agree with you. I also have a fundamental trust. I also like have a documentary association that I founded that is in particular concerned with protecting public media, because they also they're always the bad guys. Public media and documentaries, it's the commissioning editor is always responsible for all of our problems, and that's a very unfair position to put them under, because we are collectively responsible for our challenges. And the true enemy is not the media. The true enemy is somewhere else. But I would really love to show Solomon to our audience if you haven't seen it before, if you're not from Greece and not familiar with the work that they're doing. And also, I'm really curious to give Karina the floor a little bit to allow you to show some of your data visualization and storytelling so that it can be more concrete for the uninitiated. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think it's fit to the conversation we're having right now to show this project that we did. It was published in September 2024, just now, a few months ago. And it was an investigation, it's called Who Owns the Media? And it's an investigation that lasted for 18 months. And as I said before, it was one of these cases when we had to make a data set from scratch, actually, because the data were online and they were available, but then they were very chaotic and unstructured, so we had to find them and then structure them in a way so that we could make this network that you see on the screen right now. What we did essentially was to map the business activity of a dozen of powerful media men in Greece. We wanted to find out which media organizations they own, and also what other companies they own and in which sectors, if it's energy or if it's construction, and explore if there is any conflict of interest arising there, because when you have like, I don't know, hundreds of corporations, and then you control a big portion of the media, I guess some things are not published, and some are for some reason. So yeah, that's an investigation we did, and basically how we built the data set was by reading thousands of financial statements, finding some court documents and other kind of documents that we could get to the ultimate beneficiary owner of each company. And I think that's a project that's kind of adjacent to what we're talking.
And so even in this day and age, are you physically reading with your own eyes each of those bank statements, or are you using new technologies to speed up the process? How have things changed from the nuts and bolts, old school investigative journalism to like reflect the world that we live in today?
That's a very interesting and painful question, because I keep thinking that, was it another way that we could do it, like in more automated way? But I don't think there was. If someone knows, please don't tell me. Because we had to find companies, the financial statements were not structured in the same way so that we could extract the data by writing a code or anything. And some of the financial statements were scanned PDFs at the moment, and some of it could be, I don't know. We did it with our bare eyes.
And how many is we?
We is 3 people.
And how long did you spend working out who owns the media?
We were working on other stories as well, but I think it took like 10 months with on and offs. Then we also spent a big portion of the time for discussing our methodology, because we wanted to be something like very concrete, and we were also interested in coming up with a methodology that maybe other people could also use and conduct research with. And then we had the fact-checking process, which also took for a long time. It took, I think, 2 to 3 months. Because we wanted an independent fact-checker to go through what we found and one by one, like, check the documents that we had collected and say, yeah, that's okay. So at the beginning we had 1,000 companies, and then after the fact-checking, which was also kind of brutal, we ended up having 700 companies in our data set, which are the ones that you can see in the network.
And what's the impact of a project like this, either on audiences? Like, are you interested in the metrics of who is like interacting with the website, or using this mapping to better inform themselves, but also maybe on like a judicial level? Did it have outcomes of like exposing illegalities, or is it more about helping audiences to make informed decisions about why maybe certain things are appearing in that media? Maybe you can speak more about it.
Yeah, it's the latter, actually. We didn't care about offering interpretations for this one. We just wanted to make a map of how the media structure is in Greece, so that the audience could visit and revisit and interact with that, and also make a more active way of, getting information, maybe, instead of reading a text. A text with all this information either way would be like unreadable. But yeah, I don't know what the impact is, to be honest. We did have a big event where we discussed the findings, or we launched the project, and we expected 100 or 200 people, but like I think 1,000 people arrived, and that was very moving and unexpected. And obviously, other media didn't pick up the story for obvious reasons. So I can't quite tell what's the impact, but I think it's a useful tool. It's a photo of the moment, because we have to update it again and again.
I think also to come back to the question of like, who do we trust? Again, I know we're not in like a good time, but I do want to trust the audience too. I do want to trust the reader, and I do want to trust that media literacy can improve or change or whatever if we are more transparent. So I really think that these kind of projects are so fruitful, even if they are months of painstaking research of going through the documents. Like, I think that this is like a wonderful thing. And I think also it would be so helpful for every audience to have access for this. Also because I grew up in Australia, which is where Rupert Murdoch comes from. So maybe that's also why I'm a bit like crazy about these things. Crazy. But Jake, I'd love to know more about how your research and work is organized. If you could give us also some insights either into concrete projects you've been involved in. I know you also bought some clips, or if you want to talk about like, a research project a little bit from start to end, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'll show one of the clips. I think it's not a bad example. It's an investigation we did about 2 years ago now. And at the heart, it was very like, obviously on paper it was a very simplistic concept. Obviously, loads more work went in under the surface, and it was just after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, and for lots of different reasons, we were keen to sort of try and find a space where there was a story we could spend a long time on, because we're making documentaries, but doing it sort of within a news environment, which means that you can very quickly get, beaten by a lot quicker, more nimble organizations. So we explored this story that had got a reasonable amount of pickup in Russian media, in Russian independent media, and a little bit elsewhere in Europe, but not a huge amount, which was quite soon after the full-scale invasion. There was an anti-war protest in Moscow, and off the back of that, a group of young female protesters had all been arrested and then very badly beaten up in a police station by a police officer who hadn't sort of identified himself or provided any, of the, required information to make him identifiable and accountable. So we sort of set out, the aim very simply was to try and work out who this guy was. And that was, and they just referred to him as the man in black, just because he was wearing a black polo neck. And so in terms of the film, it was just finding that. And what we tried to do is, with some of the women who had been there that day, was try and sort of, from the very small amount of evidence, see if we could pull the threads and just follow a trail of evidence from, not knowing to knowing. So it's a very sort of simple step-by-step bit of storytelling, but it also maybe brings in a decent example of what we were saying before, of almost like showing the audience everything and, being completely transparent about how it all worked. And also allowing audiences to, if they want to replicate it, check, then they can as well. So this is like a short clip that kind of shows a few of those steps in the first clip.
They spent weeks searching with no luck. But then, a breakthrough.
В начале весны 2022 года взломали базу клиентов, которые пользуются сервисом доставки, называется Яндекс.Еда, и опубликовали данные о всех заказах, всех пользователей.
They combed through the data to see if any orders had been placed to Bratislava police station. They had. 9 people had used the service to have food delivered to that address.
Мы постепенно начали проверять их. Оставалось в этот момент только надеяться, что они этим сервисом пользуются. Как я помню, там был один номер, в котором было имя Иван.
You can't track a name as common as Ivan, but phone numbers are like digital footprints. They leave tracks. We followed those tracks to a website showing his was used to place 6 classified adverts. One from 2019 is selling a desk chair from Bratislava police station, which, when added to the Yandex food order, is another indication that Ivan works there. That advert doesn't tell us anything more about him. But further down the list, we see something else. A car for sale, less than 10 minutes drive from Bratislava police station. And unlike the last one, this one has a full name. Ivan Ryabov.
А когда я просто вбила в Яндексе Иван Рябов, то у меня достаточно быстро в ленте была эта фотография. У У меня был очень сильный тремор, у меня тряслись руки. Отправила я фото в чат.
They'd found him. The man in black is Ivan Ryabov.
It's basically, we knew that this, you know, this has happened in this one location, but that was sort of all we had. And, you know, working with the women, or some of the women that you see there in the film, we sort of set about it, and basically we got very, very lucky in the sense that there was, quite soon after the war began, there was a data leak from the sort of Uber Eats, Deliveroo sort of service in Russia, and we found that that people had physically ordered food to this police station. So we thought that perhaps that was a way of sort of finding out people who were working there, and maybe, you know, they'd ordered food there. And so from that list we then did sort of the painstaking work of trying to work out who all these people were. And then following all these trails of evidence that you see there of, you know, classified ads and all this other stuff, to basically get to a point where, you know, we'd gone from a food order to a phone number, to a classified ad, to a name, to a photo. And then all of the people in the police station that day were able to say, yeah, you know, that's him. So that was sort of the process of that one, yeah.
So moral of the story, if you're going to beat up a bunch of women in a police station or at your place of work, don't also order Uber Eats.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that is.
But in a more serious note, I would really love to know more concretely, what do you mean, like, by what does a data leak look like? Is it like a long telephone list of things, or is it more metadata? I don't know, I'm using terminology, I don't even understand what it means. Is it like code, or is it like, what is a data leak? What are you referring to?
Yeah, I suppose there's lots of different ways it can look, as Karina sort of alluded to as well. In this case, it was names and phone numbers, basically. It was just a very long list, which obviously then had the added extra of, we had to sort of deal with it in a very careful way, where we were sort of being pushed by the journalistic right to know, without creating any issues around sort of data protection. So we had to sort of handle that in a very basically a very careful way, and remove anything that wasn't completely necessary to what we had to do to find this person and have that public interest to push that forward.
Do you also work with law enforcement agencies if you have uncovered something that is like in kind of the criminal element, or do you publish it and that's that?
Not usually, no. I think things get very messy if, you know, the two start to meet, and you hope. I suppose the space here, and what was interesting about it is that the reason we went after the story was because a lot of the women who'd been there had made official complaints about what had happened, and, you know, they had said on the surface that there was going to be a review and all this other stuff. So it's that space where actually the official channels of, you know, legally prosecuting someone for committing a crime in their place of work had failed because of the environment at the time. And so that was the space, I suppose, where we were like, okay, there is a public interest in trying to reveal who this person is. And we got incredibly, incredibly lucky, because we had to basically do the whole thing. You know, none of us were able to go to Russia and sort of stand outside the police station and see who was coming in and out. It all had to be done from things that we could access from our computers, wherever the team were based.
Great, thank you so much. So Giorgos, you're next. Give us insights into how you work.
Right. Well, I'll start from the start, from the last point you raised about data leaks, right? So this can take various forms. So they can be whistleblowers that you've known for a long time, or sources that you know in the security sources for a long time who feed you with information. This can come from Proton mail accounts, from which will just have like a subject line and a single sentence saying "check this out," and the end. And then you have to see what's going on, if something is going on. It can come from people going to the website of the medium you work for and using one of the confidential applications available to download data. It can come from information that you get. It's all sorts of data, you know. It's more a matter of like how much time, money, effort, and you know the news cycle allows you to pursue those kinds of things. So what we usually do is like if there's an event that captures the imagination of the entire world. The latest one I can think of was in Greece at least, was the Pylos shipwreck off the coast of Greece, where more than 600 people lost their lives. So we kind of scrambled together. What we usually do is we create this so-called war room, where we try to create cross-border collaborations with other media that we've probably worked before, and we try to assign tasks based on everyone's capabilities and try. So someone might be better with sources, someone else might be better with data journalism, someone else might be better with doing on-the-ground work and stuff like that. And we have sometimes an organization like Lighthouse Reports or Bellingcat or whatever who oversee the project. Everything is done as confidential environment as possible, and then a joint publication date is agreed across media so that it maximizes impact and it maximizes the reach to people. In the best case scenario, which was the Pylos one, best quote unquote in terms of investigation, I think most of our findings, correct if I'm wrong, I think it was a matter of months, 3 or 4 months, that we were able to publish the Pylos investigation. Yeah, weeks, but then the second one was like, no? Yeah, anyway, but sometimes, like the latest one that we published with German, Swiss, Spanish, Solomon as well, and stuff, it took us more than a year. I mean, if I tell my friends and they ask me, what are you working on? And I'm saying, I'm working on investigation. And so, is this the same investigation you've been working since 2014 or 2013? They're like, oh God, I wish I had your life, you know. Like they don't get like how long these processes can take, and how much fact checking can get into, and all the travel that has to happen, and all the money involved. And I also brought some videos. I don't know if we have time to show.
We want to see. It's the end of the festival. People are tired. They want to see the cool shit that you've been doing. I think we should watch them. All right, okay. Well, I think that's quite, because it kind of sits with seeing is no longer believing. I mean, it's quite amazing, to be honest. So the first clip, if we have it ready, it shows what you said, like a leak. Do we have? So we got this video where you see a refugee boat. With women, children, and stuff like that, and Greek Coast Guard using sticks to force them back. I'm not going to go into too much legal details, but this is illegal. The second video, the last boat we saw was Frontex.
February 19th, 2024. On the Mediterranean Sea between Turkey and Greece,
this is the
an
documentary
inflatable
that we
boat
created.
carrying migrants is confronted by the Greek Coast Guard and forced to turn back.
Grab his stick! Grab his stick!
In the background, a boat that's been deployed by the EU's border protection agency, Frontex. These kinds of encounters shouldn't be happening anymore.
The next clip shows, can we put the next clip?
Frontex must be strengthened.
With
What
even
is
more
Frontex?
Frontex support. That's why it's important to strengthen Frontex.
To expand Frontex even more.
Frontex is the instrument.
Frontex? With help from Frontex.
Policymakers wanted to look tough on border protection, pouring
Frontex
more
is
and
the
more
best-
money into the agency over the years. Since
the
its
best funded
establishment, the
agency in
annual
the EU.
Frontex budget has increased from 6 million euros to more than 900 million.
So we confronted the new head of Frontex. This is the next video.
And since I'm in office, I received no reports on misbehavior from Frontex officers.
He emphasized that since he's been in this role, there have been no reports of misconduct. But is that true?
Is that true? Here is where we prove it isn't. The next video.
According to our research, the first incident took place on February 19th, 2024. The people on the boat sent the Norwegian NGO their location using a WhatsApp message from Greek territorial waters. Forensics checked this again. By conducting a visual comparison of the mountain ranges in the video with the real landscape, they were able to determine the location more precisely. Everything indicated the boat was in Greek waters. The people on board had a right to claim asylum. According to a handbook in our possession, Frontex officials are also required to proactively inform the asylum seekers of their rights. But it looks like the people here were probably towed back into Turkish waters.
We didn't stop there. Next video, please.
Journalists from the ARD TV studio in Istanbul met him in an empty house.
We
He
met
is
the
from
people
Afghanistan
in the boat.
and is hiding with his wife and 3 children. The Turkish authorities want to deport him back to Afghanistan. He doesn't want us to show his or his family's faces or to use his real name.
I'm very afraid that I might be the only one deported while my family stays here. I won't survive in Afghanistan.
And the last one, please.
The second case also involves a full rubber boat on its way to Greece.
We showed this to the
This
Frontex
time,
chief.
there is footage showing the alleged pushback.
So this is the one, but we just showed it to the
Masked
Frontex
men
base.
chasing a boat full of migrants, threatening them with sticks.
Grab his stick! Grab his stick!
The boat.
What is the Greek's response? Seeing is not
When
believing.
asked, the Greek government flatly denied carrying out illegal pushbacks. But there are numerous reports, including from
I
UN
rest my case.
organizations, indicating that Greece has been carrying out violent pushbacks for years.
Also, if you ever feel like changing your careers, you'd be a terrific editor for people trying to raise money for their documentaries. Thank you for putting together this selection to explain the story.
Is anyone listening
perfectly clearly, perfectly clearly for us in like such a short way. So, yeah, I don't know if that's not sexy work. I don't know what is. Like this, I live for the.
Honestly,
for
but
this stuff.
this is what you're seeing with your own eyes, you know, and it's proven beyond doubt. And this I didn't show. But the Greek ombudsman, who's like the watchdog of the government, said there hasn't been one single officer who has ever been punished about misconduct at the border. I found this quite amazing, and this is why we keep doing this, even if it doesn't appear to have the impact. That
You want to add something, Karina?
Yeah, I think that this is a great example of it. It fits perfectly with the title of this discussion, I think, because when I saw that this is going to be the title of the discussion, the first thing that I was thinking of were the pushbacks here in the Mediterranean, because they've been reported for so long time, and with imagery, with testimonies, everything that one can imagine. And the official the official response by the government and the EU officials, sometimes it's that this is not happening. And this is very weird. Like, it's twisting the reality. And I think that's why...
It's old-fashioned gaslighting. It's like, you're crazy, it's not happening. Yeah. Like, that's what it is. And I think that's why also I start to go a little loopy living in Germany, because of this high-level misinformation campaigns that are around you all the time. And we also need to be more... I mean, we all agree in this room, but I still think it's right to say it, like I don't know how to, it sounds so stupidly self-evident to say it. I can't think of a more elegant way. Like the imperial imbalances in the world, and thinking about 2014, like as I was saying when I was living in Saxony, for me, I also desperately don't, and I still don't want to give up on European unity. I don't want to be misinformed from like the propaganda machine that comes from Russia that makes me give up. But at the same time, I have to acknowledge the crimes of our imperial powers, and how also people, the further away from Brussels you are, the worse they treat you. So it's a really, really, really complicated time for all of us, and in particular for people on the front lines of this culture information war that we are in. And I hate militarized language, but I also don't know how better to explain it. I wonder if anybody wants to share like thoughts or feelings or questions, or if we have other people working in investigative places in the audience, you're most welcome to share about your own work. I see a raised hand at the back.
So I was working as a high school teacher before working in film, and I just wanted to know, like, maybe some of your thoughts about teaching good practices, fact-checking journalism to kids that are 12 to 17 years old, and that can span, you know, obviously a variety of different countries, languages, societies, etc.
Can I take that, because my kids are 12 and 17 years old? Like, I don't know. Like, so I don't know. I just tell them, you know, because they come at me every day and they said, "Dad, did you listen to XYZ?" Which is totally wrong, you know. So I think it's very important to have some media literacy in schools, right? So some sort of... I find it amazing that this is so important for our democracies, and this is so absent in school systems, especially in Greece. Like, you know, there's no media literacy, no way that our young students and pupils can just, you know, tell what is right, what is wrong, how to basically, you know, cross-reference information, what to do. This is what I'm trying to do with my kids. Whenever they tell me something, I tell them, find me the source, find me a second source, you know. I just do them little journalists, right, you know, and then come back to me, you know. And more often than not, they change their minds. I think, but this is not, I think, my job, because I'm, you know, but it is the school's job, and I think that's really important. Media literacy.
I mean, this was also one of my questions for you, which is particularly in if you're trying to make feature-length non-fiction films at the moment, it's really challenging to finance them. And often we hear, or I'm told by people also in this cycle of gaslighting to make sure that people don't believe what they see or do believe other things that they see, that young audiences in particular are not interested in watching long format or interacting with deep research. And like in my opinion, but this is my opinion and I'm really happy and excited to hear yours, I don't buy it. I also don't buy it. Also because in my scam, strap yourself in. You're not going to like what I say next. No, I do buy that, but you're not going to like what I say next, because because I had to stop reading some of the news outlets that I read and watching things that I used to enjoy. I have gone down somewhat of a YouTube rabbit hole, but I am not watching YouTube to gather facts about the world.
I watch Joe Rogan all the time.
Oof, I can't do that. I don't have... It's good to know who's out there. I agree. I read tabloids every day. I read them every day because I'm curious to know. But so you have to use your microphone. But the thing that I find the most interesting to watch, like on YouTube, is actually stuff that can be like more than 2 hours long, where people are telling you about stuff. So I really wonder: do you buy that audiences cannot handle long form storytelling? Is that how you feel? Are you also trying to shorten and snappy and put things into formats that audiences can enjoy?
Corina can confirm me on this. Our latest piece on Solomon about the use of artificial intelligence at the EU's external border was like, how long was it? Like 8,000 words long or something. It was quite huge.
It was long.
It was huge. I don't know if it was a commercial success. You don't have to tell me. But you know, I do think there's an audience for this.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I don't believe that either. And when we're talking about TikTok that you mentioned, I think we are mostly speaking about Generation Z, right? And like we're referring to the younger generations. And at least in Greece, I don't get the feeling that the people and that the younger generations are not interested in politics. They're not interested in discussing things that are happening. The most recent demonstrations here in Greece, maybe you saw some of them, about the Tembi accident, were full of young people. I think that especially in Greece, people even maybe, I don't know, maybe they're even craving for more investigations. The problem, I think, is that most people don't trust the media, and they're not completely wrong not to trust them sometimes, especially in Greece, because Giorgos knows how painstaking the fact-checking in all these outlets that you mentioned before might be, but that's not the case in Greece most of the times. Also, there's a very high concentration in media ownership, so it's a complicated story. But I don't think that people are not interested. I think that we need to restore the trust in the media again, which is hard, but we have to do it by sticking to the media ethics and the journalism ethics and the journalism standards, and also finding a way to reach the audiences in a way that it's kind of interesting, I guess, and not boring. And that's also part of our job, I think. We can't expect to write texts that look like technical reports and expect people to read them. We're not even interested in writing them, I think. So we need to find new ways to reach people, because that's the thing, I guess, to make an impact through our work, not to make an archive of what is happening and right now without no one, I don't know, reading what we're writing for.
Yeah, especially if you're dedicating 10 months of your life to reading financial reports. Indeed, it's good if the fruits of the labor are audience reach. Jake, do you have also any other contributions to this question of like what can we do for young people to help with their media literacy, or like do you feel that we've lost them?
I don't think we lost them. And to sort of go into that idea of what was being said before about, you know, is there a space for long form? I think there massively is, and I think it's that sort of worry that people are having is coming from maybe the wrong place. And although it's a much more sort of diverse and busy landscape, I think the space for good storytelling is still there. And I think that argument comes quite often from, you know, people who just need to be better at telling stories. Because, you know, I think about it even when I was growing up, or maybe a bit before, or at least my parents' generation definitely is, you know, there was so little out there. And, you know, if you made a current affairs documentary or an investigative documentary or whatever, you know, at least within the UK context, you knew you had like a TV hour and you had an audience who were probably already like in their slippers and was, you know, to physically change the channel, you know, they would have had to get up. And even then there would have been 3 other channels, which with probably even worse stuff on. And like, you know, although there's some amazing stuff produced at the time, you do watch stuff and you're like, this is, you know, insanely boring. And so in a environment now where there's so much more choice, I don't think it's a sense of like, you know, people don't have long attention spans for like good content. I think they know that there's so much on offer, and if it's not good enough, they're going to find it somewhere else. And you know, and that's why telling the story or presenting the stuff, and I mean the example that Karina showed of like this amazing sort of beautifully designed like visual journalism, you know, the way you can engage with that rather than having to read, you know, 2,000 words of like, you know, columns in a newspaper, you can see why that's much more engaging. And I think there's also something to be said for being, as a journalist or a filmmaker or whatever you're doing, or an artist or whatever, is thinking more about medium and how you present your findings and your story or whatever it is. And I think we've got to move perhaps beyond that idea of, you know, either you're producing a TV hour or you're producing a 90-minute film, because, you know, and I'm speaking from stuff I've done in the past, like where you sort of try and stretch it out, but deep down, it could have been 15 minutes. It could have been 15 minutes, and I think that's the part of telling the story. You know, it's being a good editor as well, and understanding that actually, you know, how am I going to get someone so I can really take them through this story on a level playing field as well, and trusting audiences that they will come with you on this sort of journey, so long as you're not, you know, making it 3 hours just for the sake of making it 3 hours kind of thing. And think, you know, I some of the best investigations I see people doing, like online digital investigations, people are doing on, you know, in 3-minute TikToks, and they're really engaging the storytelling and the step to step, and, you know, they're snappy and they're quick, and they probably don't need to be longer. But then there's other films and there's other investigations where there's a lot more to it, and there's more character, and there's more, you know, there's more nuance to be told, in which case it often warrants a sort of a longer thing. And so I hope that in that space there is, people aren't feeling sort of dejected by it. I think if anything, it's just making everyone, you know, better, because they've, you know, they haven't got an assured viewership like they used to.
Do you like it when artists interpret your investigations and turn them into something else? Has it happened in the case of research that you've done or that you've seen?
No, I'd be incredibly flattered if anyone ever did that. No, never.
Maybe you just don't know about it.
Maybe.
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. In my opinion, most people today believe only the things that they want to believe. And even if you make a very deep investigation with so many risks and all this stuff, they will just see a video on the TikTok, for example, or even a person from the government. They will blame you that you are enemy of the government, with very silly statements. They will fight against you. How you deal with this, and what are you doing to overcome it? Thank you.
But so the question, just to rephrase your question, do you mean how did these...
How psychologically you overcome it, and what can you do to convince people to believe in the investigation and be more open-minded?
Okay, I will repeat the question for the people watching on the streaming platform. So it's, how do you psychologically overcome this lack of belief, and how do you keep going?
Look, as I said, listen, that I don't think it's an end in itself to persuade every single person who watches something or reads something that this is the truth. You know, I think what we try to do is like feel good with ourselves, our morals, our mission, our duties, our fact checking, and everything. Now, how this can be interpreted, I mean, obviously we're not, omnipotent. I mean, everyone can make whatever they want to make of it. I mean, these videos that I just showed, after this was published, I read hundreds of comments. Bad move. Hundreds of comments saying like, why are they there? Good for them and whatever. I mean, okay, fine. I mean, there are these people. I'm not going to find them one by one and explain to them, you know, the European Union asylum law or the Greek asylum law or why these people shouldn't be treated this way. You know, this is not my job. This is the job of the government. This is a job not to demonize people. This is the job of the public education system to integrate them. This is the job of the work market. I just was talking to a British colleague the other day, like today, and we were saying like migrant workers have a higher employment rate than British-born ones. You know, like I mean, I don't know. I mean, facts need to have some sort of, you know, relevance. To some people they don't. Fine. I don't think at any point in humanity's history we've been overwhelmed by geniuses. And I don't think the 21st century will be any different.
I also think that life is long and cyclical, and we find ourselves in a bad moment. But it's also very, like, we're also then in the silo or gazing at the navel if we think, like, humanity ends and the world stops with us, you know? So, like, I'm very upset about the world that we live in, and I try every day with the resources I have to make contributions to live in a good and fair world. So that's what I do. Do I fly a lot? Yes, I do. Do I sometimes buy fast fashion? Yes, I do. Am I a vegetarian? Yes, I am. You know, like, so you're making choices. And I also think one of the privileges of the work that we do is that we offer people choices rather than, you know, conforming to whatever the status quo is. You know, the non-conformance, non-compliance to the status quo is the incredible thing that your work does. And I really hadn't thought about, like, in the framework of, like, investigative journalism is uncovering secrets. I just hadn't, you know, like, it's really nice to be able to develop better language together to defend what we're doing and why we do it. And that's also why I'm interested in these questions of impact, you know, like not every successful impact goal is, in the case of the work you're doing, putting a war criminal in jail. But if you are making contributions in the chain to disrupt the corruption, is great.
Can I use 10 seconds?
Yeah, of course.
We just did an investigation into Frontex. It took many years, right? It ended up with the chief of Frontex, Fabrice Leggeri. He's French, you know. He resigned. And he's now an MEP with Le Pen's party in European Parliament. I mean, there is some impact in terms of, like, you know, he's gone from the agency and there's been some reform in the agency or whatnot, but he's still having, like, this cushy life in Brussels and Strasbourg, you know. It's not always that straightforward. And to be honest, I don't think it is our work to do this, you know. We do what, we're just journalists. We're not anything more or less.
That's also funny because I think I also watched too many fiction films as a child. Like, All the President's Men was probably like my motivation to, like, live for a while. So yeah, it's good that we don't romance them and make them responsible for our collective liberation. But I do think that you do a terrific job helping us live in a more transparent world, and for that I thank you. if we don't have any other questions, oh yeah, please. Oh, so we have two, but we have plenty of time.
Yeah, just quickly, I thought your discussion throws up an interesting question about the nature of lying and the extent of lying, and that with social media, you're dealing largely with superficial untruths. Now, when I was growing up, if you lied, you made sure that you weren't found out. Now, with Trump, he'll lie, and he can be fact-checked in the course of the conversation he's having. It doesn't make any difference. The interesting question is, in the UK, where you're looking at the kind of the deeper lies, you have these stories which go on for years and years and years. And actually, investigative journalism, investigative documentaries, don't ever really engage with them. And I can speak personally, having an issue with the National Health Service at the moment concerning my son. And if you go back to the Hillsborough football disaster, it took years to resolve. You know, the post office scandal where sub-postmasters and mistresses were being accused of fiddling the books. It was a faulty computer system. No one was interested for years and years and years. You're talking about 15, 20 years. And then eventually with that, it was a TV drama, Mr. Bates Against the Post Office, which made a national scandal of it. So I suppose my question to you is whether you've been involved in similar stories where, in a way, nothing has happened, or you haven't been able to advance it, because it's to do with a kind of deeper lie and not being able to interest people in the story. And from our point of view, with the National Health Service, we couldn't really get anyone interested in that particular story. It's taken 5 years, which is a long time in this day and age.
Corinna, if you don't mind, I think it would be cool if you would reflect on that, because you're currently also studying documentary filmmaking. So you're also someone who, it seems, employs, let's say, different forms in order to tell different stories, possibly indeed to address things like what this gentleman has raised, which is how do you take something from obscurity and make people care?
I don't know how to answer that. Because 9 out of 10, nothing happens and nothing changes, and this is disappointing at first, and I think it's similar to the question that you asked before. And this is very disappointing at first, but then I guess it's part of the job, that you feel very happy eventually when something is changing. Yeah, so I don't know what... there was this other scandal here in Greece about the wiretapping scandal, and it's one of the biggest scandals ever, I don't know, for 2 decades, even more, and nothing has happened. And the mainstream media wouldn't pick up the story for ages, and no one knew about it. And then when everyone learned about it, nothing happened. We'll see how that goes, but I don't know how you can make a change. I know how you can get used to the disappointment of it.
But at the same, again, I think it's good to unburden people of the responsibility of all steps in the chain or all links in the chain. Like, this is super important because, the work of the investigative journalist is also to, let's say, disseminate facts in whatever form that may take, be it a 3-minute TikTok that is fact-checked or a 6-part series that plays on television. There is something also valuable, or at least I think in my work, of making things for the record, making things for the archive that can then be discovered and reinterpreted and reused in the future. So that's why, for me, the work is never futile. To record it is also to be able to disrupt the gaslighting, even if it's not in our lifetime or the next one, we also look back on our ancestors for, advice?
And sorry, just to get back to what you said, like it also has to do with the diminishing news cycle, right? So I read somewhere like that if Watergate broke out today, it would be forgotten next week. I saw an interview by Monica Lewinsky. She had 120 articles published in the Washington Post just about Lewinsky and the stained dress back at the day, and then this could be today with no news within 24 hours. There's just so much little space to kind of comprehend what's going on and have the headspace and the time. And it's not like even we journalists. I mean, sometimes I think like our only job is to follow the news, and still we can't follow it. And imagine someone doing an actual job. Like it's become so incredibly difficult to follow this up, to get some context, to be able to. I remember like back in the day when you had like the newspaper, you would just go to sleep, wake up the next morning, read the news, and then do the same ritual the next day, right? There was nothing in between. Maybe the evening news, I think that's absolutely kind of transformed the landscape.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting that you've got everything is speeding up, almost to the point where no one can keep up. But yet you've got a very, like in the UK, the Grenfell Tower, which burnt down. It was a very open scandal, and yet...
This is what Corina said, that if it doesn't, like, some cases are not investigated,
But I mean, it was quite open. Everyone knew about it. Everyone knew who was lying and who was, and yet at the same time,
nothing happened.
It's unresolved.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think the latest news is they'll probably demolish it.
So who remembers about Boris Johnson's COVID parties, for example? I don't know. Some do, right?
Some do. He's writing for the Daily.
I should pick another example. I don't know.
He's writing for the Daily Mail, so everyone remembers.
I think
Johnson.
also just for the time, we should ask at least one of the last questions.
Yeah. Hi. So as a filmmaker who's also working with investigative journalism, I'm a film editor who works in a media outlet called Investigative Reporting Lab. And I know how painstaking is the job that you as journalists are doing, and I am aware that it takes years. We produce investigative documentaries, which some are short for 15 minutes and they take 2 months to make, some are an hour or 80 minutes and it take more than a year. And I think nobody will ever understand how much it takes unless they work this job. But I wanted to address some of the last comments that you gave after his question regarding people commenting on social media on the work that we publish. And I think that is very, very important, just as much as publishing stuff, to also fight back the comments, because most of the time those are not so naive. There are so many power-staking organizations who just want to change the discourse of what we are trying to say by hiring bots who will just spam your comment section, and then that changes the discourse. People will read through the comments and not even open your article, and they will make their assumption out of the comments that they're reading. So what we do as a practice in Investigative Reporting Lab is we actually put the effort to reply to every single comment, every single one, with links. And we actually were thinking before these all big cuts in finances happened in the past month and a half, we were actually pitching this idea of having like truth bots. So we actually employ real people who will stay online and just reply with facts.
Did you ever convince anyone?
Yeah. There are a lot of people that they just, they then follow up in the replies and they be like, but that dude, what are you saying? They just replied here, then that is not true. So just get your facts straight. And you know that then you have done your job. So yeah.
Training the AI for good. We're really out of time, but actually, Martina, I would like to give you the last word because you raised your hand. And in the spirit of democracy, I don't want to silence you.
Thank you. I just wanted to refer what you said earlier, because like disrupting gaslighting and what you just said with all the lies, and that it's not very rewarding, the work we do so many times, but also I think it's really important, I think, to document these times. And I was just working on a film for the last 5 years, and I just realized it's about something which happened 30 years ago, and how rewarding it can be for the victims and the survivors, even so much later. You talk about these things, and so maybe I just wanted to say, let's keep this also in mind, because I know it's just fucking hard work and very frustrating at the moment, but giving up is no option.
I mean, this is where I feel so... it sounds sort of esoteric point to finish on, but also we are in Greece and there are the ruins up the hill that you can go and look at if you need to be reminded that there are things that are bigger than us. But when you also have the privilege of living in a place that has traces of humanity from 250,000 years ago, and you see their ability, the storytelling abilities that existed then, it's worth it. It's worth it to keep the traces. It's worth it. It's always, every step is worth it, I think. The only time that I feel that my work is like silly and meaningless is when I'm having a very bad time, but then I remind myself that it has its worth, and then I can sleep very comfortably at night.
Can I add 2 seconds? Yeah, I mean, lots of investigations and lots of documentaries are used in courts, are used in the international courts, are used as evidence, they're used in all sorts of things, and thanks to the work of brave filmmakers and journalists and people doing this job, people have been vindicated. So even if one person who's innocent, escapes their fate, that's worth it, I think.
Thank you, Thanos, for having us. Thank you for being a terrific audience. Thank you, dear panelists.
Thank you all for coming. There's drinks next door for our accredited guests, so you can continue the conversation there.